Good evening and welcome to the December edition of Legacy Conversations. My name is Latavia Alexander and I am the owner of LA Legal Solutions. And I say this a little bit of this every Good evening. My name is Latavia Alexander, and I want to welcome you to the December edition of Legacy Conversation series. This series is one I created primarily just to be able to get the conversation started, truly around legacy, just as the name entails. But legacy is something I feel like we hear that word thrown around a lot. It's talked about, but not really kind of the details of it. And so a big area of my practice is, or part of my business is estate planning, which is essentially just the process of making plans for what happens to your property, your things, any money you have, any of your possessions, of what happens once you pass away, or in the event that you're no longer able to take care of yourself, just making a plan for that. And so the goal of this series is to be able to help people get a little bit more comfortable having that conversation. And so, in some of the previous sessions, we've talked about just what estate planning is, kind of what that overview, what it involves, what are some of the components of it, which generally would be a will or a trust. You have an advanced medical directive or healthcare power of attorney, and then also a financial power of attorney. There's also a variety of other forms and things that you can do that become a part of what I like to say a comprehensive plan. And so, like I said, in the previous series, we've talked just kind of overview of those things, as well as gone a little deeper in terms of what is a will, what makes a will, what's valid. The same with trust. And so, if you would like to hear a bit more about those areas, I encourage you to check out some of the previous videos. Tonight or today's session will focus on some of the things you can do outside of kind of those traditional things that we think about, or those specific documents, things that can be done to help make life a little easier for you, and more so for those that your loved ones after you pass away. And so I like to call them kind of the no cost estate planning things. And so the first thing I'll talk about is the what's called it relates to your bank account. So it's a transfer on death or payable on death. It varies depending on the type of account. But what at the heart of what those do is it allows you to create a beneficiary for your bank accounts. And so what that does is, instead of when you pass away, that account is just sitting there. What it does is, if I say I want to create a payable on death from my checking account, I let the bank know, you fill out whatever respective forms they have. You let them know, you identify the person or people that you want to be the beneficiaries of your account when you pass away. You fill that out, you file it with them. It's good to also let the person know that you're planning to designate them. And so what that does is, at the time that you pass away, the person, let's say I've listed my sister, and I pass away, my sister will notify that the financial institution that Latavia has passed away. I have a copy of her death certificate and any other documents they may ask. And upon providing that and verifying that person's identity, the bank will release those funds to that individual, essentially right away. And the alternative to that is, if you don't have it set up, then it's not to say that those funds won't ever be released to who you intended to. It's just you would have to go through the probate process, which, depending on the value or size of the estate, could become costly or just time consuming. And so with that, you would be able to get access to the funds, but you'd have to wait until you open an estate to start that probate process, and then a judge or the court grants permission, essentially issues the documentation for you to take to the bank to say, okay, this person is authorized to have access to these funds for them to release it. And so there are, forms and processes involved, but setting up the payable on death or transfer on death is a much quicker process. So that can be done with your bank accounts. It can also be done with investment accounts. So you want to contact your respective financial institution and ask them what is the process to do that. The second thing that you can do is, I will caveat this by saying this will depend on if you live in a state that allows it. So you can also set up or create a transfer on death mortgage or deed, excuse me, a deed. And that essentially it operates similar in that you would be able to designate the person or people that you want your property, the deed to be transferred to, or ownership to be transferred to upon you passing away. So like I said, not every state allows this, but for the ones that do, you would want to contact the Register of Deeds office or the equivalent of that office in your state to inquire about that process. You'd also want, I would encourage you consult an attorney to make sure that everything is done properly, and so that it is written in a way that you want it to make sure that it accomplishes what you want needed to do. A third thing that I want to talk about is you can, in terms of funeral or burial expenses, or even if you would like to be cremated, there are companies you can work with, or even contacting funeral homes directly, where you can prepay for your final arrangements in terms of if you want to be buried, you can work with a funeral home to essentially pre-plan and prepay for some of those expenses. The same if you would like to be cremated. With that, I would say you want to make sure that you're contacting, whether it be the funeral home or if you have a specific area you would like to be buried in, contacting that cemetery and asking what the process is, notifying them. And then also, once you have those plans secured, notifying your loved ones of, hey, these are my wishes. This is the information. Make sure they either have it or they know where to find it when you pass away, so they're not trying to figure that out. Another thing that you can do is having a advanced medical directive, or even if you don't do the formal form, having conversations with your family or your friends, your loved ones, essentially the people who would be the ones making decisions if you were to be sick for an indefinite amount of time, or when you pass away, or if there's a terminal illness, those who would be the ones who need to make those decisions, making sure that you let them know what your desires are. If you were to be in an end stage condition, do you want them, do you want them to resuscitate you? Do you not want that to happen? What are your desires? What would you want to happen? Make sure that they know that. As in having those conversations, I understand are not always, it's not a fun conversation to have, but it is a necessary one to have. And so the more that we can discuss it on the front end, the better it will be on the back end, because it's going to be a stressful time. People will be grieving. And so the least amount of decisions they have to make is ideal. So we want to do as much as we can while we are alive to help make that transition as smooth or as easy as possible, if easy is even a thing. And so, like I said, having the conversation, another thing that you can do is write out a list of what all your possessions are and who you want to get what. So if it's furniture in your home, if you have a jewelry collection, making sure you let people know what you want, where to find it. And of course, if you do have a will or a trust, making sure that people know that you have one and where it is. It would be very, very horrible if you took the time to create a plan and put everything into place, and then no one knows about it or they don't know how to find it. And then they're still scrambling trying to figure that out. And I often use Aretha Franklin as an example of how she did make several attempts and she did take the time to make a plan, but it was not clear to her family, her business advisors, anyone, of where those documents were or which ones were legitimate, because it took several years after she passed for them to, they found multiple wills or versions of a will or attempts, none of which were valid, until it took about maybe 4 or 5 years before they actually identified a valid will that could be used. But by that time, thousands and maybe even millions of dollars have been spent, and all that time that they can't get back, trying to figure out, well, what would she have wanted, who gets a claim to what. when, like I said, a lot of those things can be eliminated or at least minimized if we take the time to, I say, one, have the conversation with yourself about what do you want? Do you care about how your family or your loved ones are dealing with things after you pass away? And most of us do. And so if you do, then like I said, having that conversation with yourself about what your goals and desires are, and then having the conversation with your loved ones about how you want to go about that, making that plan of what that looks like, and then, like I said, hopefully having a conversation with an attorney, with a financial advisor if you have one, and if you own a business. You definitely should be having these conversations with your CPA, with your attorney in terms of if not even about just your life, but what happens to your business if you become uh, ill indefinitely or when you pass away? Do you want the business to continue? If you do, what things have you put in place to make sure that the business can continue operating once you pass away? Is there anyone else who knows how the business operates? Is there anyone who knows where you keep all of the important documents and things in the finances for the business? Would someone be able to come in, if not necessarily get started right away? Is there some form of instructions or way for them to figure it out if the desire is to keep it going, or if the desire is not to keep it going? You want to make sure that's clear as well. And so for those who have LLCs or even corporations, these are things you want to make sure are covered in your operating agreement or your bylaws. So that is something else I would say that for all of my business owners, if you have not taken the time to think about that or address it, please do. It's just as important as getting it started and making sure that you have everything in order. Um, so like I said, those are just a few things I wanted to touch on in terms of things that you could do on your own that should be little to no cost to you, but will go a long way in terms of your overall plan. So thank you for watching. I do hope this was helpful for you in terms of helping to start the conversation for yourself as well as with your loved ones. This is the last installment for 2024, but the Legacy Conversation series will continue in 2025. So please stay tuned for future sessions. Thank you.